as usually is the case in a fog of war, there are claims and counterclaims. We don't know the exact truth of what went down at the Kremlin. What we do know is that according to the Kremlin, there was a drone attack on that building. There were 2 drones that were used, and it was nothing but a terrorist attack according to Moscow and an assassination attempt on President Vladimir Putin, charges that Ukraine has denied. Now, whichever way this goes, one thing one can say with certainty is that this may be the most serious escalation we have seen thus far in this 14-month war. Would you agree, sir?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Neha, that potentially this has the potential to sort of, veer out of hand, so to say. But I think for its own credibility, Kremlin and Russia should come up with some evidence to incontrovertibly demonstrate that this attack was launched from Ukraine. Because I think there are so many huge gaping holes in their assertion that they have come from Ukraine. Meaning, I find it totally inconceivable to believe that, these drones can travel all these 600 odd kilometers from Ukraine to the Kremlin without being detected. And, they have very sophisticated missile defense systems, which in fact S-400 India is also importing from them. And if their missile defense systems have not been able to detect, then like much of the other equipment that has not really acquitted itself very creditably during the 14 months of war in Ukraine, this would also be seen as not a very effective defense system. So that is number one. Secondly, I think even more importantly, Neha, that Ukraine has always maintained, and I think in the statement also they have stated very clearly, they've always maintained that, their offensive, counter-offensive, etc., is going to be to push back the Russians out of the Ukrainian territory illegally occupied by them. They have said very clearly in the past and even now that it is not their intention to take the war too deep within Russia. And this would be sort of, really going deep within Russia. I think Ukraine's partners, NATO, America, neighbors, Poland, none of them really wants to get involved in a conflict directly with Russia. So they have also been telling Ukraine that they should not take the war into Russia. And that is why these equipment and the weaponry that has been provided to Ukraine is purely of a defensive nature, and its range is also limited, like HIMARS, etc., just up to 80 kilometers, so that it can hit the Russian troops which are on Ukrainian territory, but not beyond that. And even the F-16s and other aircraft that Ukraine has been asking for, they have not been granted. Many of the sophisticated tanks in large numbers have not been given. So I am very skeptical and doubtful that these drones, came from Ukraine. Let more evidence come, and also there are very many disgruntled elements within Russia against Mr. Putin. It could have been the handiwork of some of those also.
Well, you've made some very important and interesting points. You are saying you find it very hard to believe that these drones could have actually come all the way from Ukraine, in a sense evading all the defense systems that Moscow has in place. There are disgruntled elements within Russia whose handiwork this could be. Let me take this across to Major General Bishambar Dayal. Sir, Ukraine has not only denied issuing this attack, they have issued a statement saying that our strategy is purely defensive in nature. We have never attacked targets on Russian territory, and they believe that this is actually Russia preparing a massive attack on Ukraine, and it is likely to use this incident as a pretext, as an excuse to launch a major escalation in this 14-month war. How do you perceive today's developments? There are pictures of smoke billowing above the dome of the Kremlin, even though the building remains undamaged. President Putin remains unharmed, but the Kremlin is calling this an assassination attempt on Putin.
Yeah, firstly, there are a number of points which Ambassador Sajjanar has made, which I think need no more elaboration, because really making an attempt with the help of UAVs all the way from Ukraine up to Kremlin, I think is not possible in today's environment. Though the missile defense system may not be able to detect the span that is there on the radar for a UAV. But there are many other sources on the ground which could have picked up the UAV, because it couldn't be. But there's no doubt that if there's one man today whom not only Ukraine but number of other elements globally would like to see from Russia, out of Russia, is Mr. Putin. So there's no doubt that, and secondly, I don't think Russia, a state like Russia, would orchestrate anything like that just to demonstrate to no point to the world. I mean, to whom? I mean, the West is not their well-wishers, America is not their well-wishers, and to their friends, I don't think they have to demonstrate anything like that either to their own public or to the global leadership or to any other country. So there is no doubt, there is a mischief, there is a handiwork. It could well be done from Moscow itself. It could well be done from the Moscow region itself, because the outer defense mechanism which is there of Russia, of Moscow itself, air defense of Moscow, which has a perimeter. So it could well be done from well within Moscow itself or the Moscow region itself. Now, Russia does not need any excuse to escalate the war in Ukraine. The war is already on. Russia has very clearly stated. And if Russia was to do anything like this to the President Palace in Kyiv, then they would have started the war from there. No, they did not start the war from there. If they could go to outer periphery of the Kyiv in the very first few days with their specialized forces, with their airborne troops, then I'm sure they could have done something to the President Palace and the government, the center of Ukraine. They never did anything like that. So I think these are all as far as Ukrainian statements are concerned, they are, I think, more of a cover-up. But there is certainly an attempt must have been done. Whether these elements have come from the rogue elements of Ukraine, rogue elements of any other country, or some regime has orchestrated that against Mr. Putin, well, that is yet to come out. I mean, some few details will come out. But I'm of the opinion Russia as a state will not do anything like this to dramatize the war. Russia as a state will not indulge in all this because it doesn't suit President Putin's either persona or personality or the might of the state. And Russia does not need an excuse to escalate war. The war is on. The war is on. Russia is not only fighting Ukraine, Russia is fighting in Ukraine. NATO, Russia is fighting in Ukraine. America, Russia is fighting a war which is being driven not only by Ukrainian people or Ukrainian armed forces, but NATO and America together.
Okay.
So I wholesomely, let's look at it like this, that what will come out of it? There's no doubt Russia will have to rethink a number of issues. Firstly, the present war which is going on is almost a skirmish, a stalemate. It's like the war which was going on in Syria few years back, right? So the war has come to a point where Russia needs a decisive punch. Whether Ukraine will draw this punch first and throw out Russians from there, or Russia will draw a punch first and will drive a little deeper so that, he creates a buffer zone between Donbas region and Ukraine. So let's see. It's a war which is going on. It's war which is being supported completely by the West, weaponized by the West, aided by the West, supported by the West. People are being trained by the West and between Russia.